Hey, this is Zach Log Lake, and I am here tonight with Chris
Hello.
and Nate,
It's me again.
and we are coming together tonight to discuss Edgar Allan Poe's poem "The Bells."
Bells, 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 bells. Hello, Gambit.
So, um, so, Chris, actually, this you suggested this poem. This is one I was not previously familiar with. So, that being the get us started.
Okay, so yeah, this is one of my favorite poems. As far as Edgar Allan Poe's stuff, it's not necessarily the deepest, but I feel like of the ones I've read from him, it's the one that has the most fun with the language. And also, instead of just sort of like starting in a very dark place, he starts it from a happy, exciting, hopeful place, and then he brings the darkness. And I think that contrast is pretty nice as far as Poe's works go.
And like I said earlier, for the month of October, I wanted to do creepy, disturbing, macabre poetry. And as far as English goes, um, Edgar Allan Poe isn't the only game in town, but he's definitely in the lead. Um, and yeah, it was interesting because when you suggested this and I looked it up for the first time and I started reading this, I'm like, this is Edgar Allan Poe. This doesn't sound like Edgar Allan Poe. And then I got to the third section. I'm like, oh, okay, there he is. Yeah, okay, now it sounds like him. Um, so
And then the fourth section is where he's most comfortable.
Yeah.
so Nate, what about you?
I really enjoyed it. I like I like the breadth of it, the how expansive it is. It covers all the kind of major human, kind of emotional states. There's merriment, sort of like a bit of lustiness, there's fear, and then there's, grief. And kind of
Well,
like a bitter grief too, not just like oh well, but it's like those bell ringing trolls celebrating my sadness. It's like god dang, all right. But yeah, I really enjoyed kind of going from like hey, hopeful, happy, sprightly season, almost childlike happiness of like just wonderment and joy, and then you got kind of that like sort of richer kind of feel like to to all you hypothetical youngsters out there watching our discussion videos, you'll understand this sort of joy I'm talking about. Is that kind of joy you get when you look at your wife on a nice evening and you're like, yeah, gonna have some me and you time later. It's that kind of joy. It's that sort of like we're very happy. There's love and all that, but there's also a little bit of an unction there. Then you have this frantic, fearful section where it's like, look, some people are running into the smoke, some people are running out, but there's nobody just sort of, perambulating around. There's nobody being just sort of languidly moving. Everybody is on edge. It's tense, it's fearful, it's frantic, and it's crazy. And then you just have the very somber, just bitterly sad and mourning section. Yeah, it's
well, it's a
Well, to be fair, that last section, it's not devoid of happiness and merriment. It's just the individuals that have the happiness and merriment are not the type of people that we like being happy.
yeah, like I said, it's
yes, the
it's a very bitter. It's very
intense
bitter. Like, oh, you enjoy ringing your bells over my sadness, you trolls and your king up there with
But
your
he,
merry bosom swelling to the bells, bells, bells.
yes, so there is actually happiness in that last thing. It ties it all
the
together.
king
I feel like it's a bit of motive assumption, really, rather than true happiness. They're just kind of like it's like I'm projecting this negative sentiment onto you, whether you feel it or not. I mean, the bell ringer might be up there like, "Oh, I wish I was home, lads." God dang bells got me deaf. Durr.
Yeah, as at least as described as the character in the poem, the king of the ringers is quite a jolly fellow. He's having a good time with this. It's what's the old description of Santa Claus, and he laughs like a bowl. When he laughs, he shakes like a bowl full of jelly. Well, this guy, his merry bosom swells with the paean of the bells. It almost kind of sounds the same.
And he dances and he yells.
Yeah, he's not bored, and it's an interesting ride for him. So
I'm now envisioning this guy as a mix of like James Hetfield and Santa Claus, like the lead, like the front man of Metallica, and just like yeah, it's like metal.
One interesting thing, just in terms of the how the text is actually written, in the fourth section, and it's very well done. Like he uses Edgar Allan Poe. At least this is what it seems to me like he's doing. He uses the rhyme to allude to a word without ever actually saying it. Because he says, they are neither man nor woman. They are neither brute nor human. And, from the context of the whole thing, to me, it's the rhyme there, but it's a pretty neat trick. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
You're breaking up a little, but
a little bit.
The drift of what you're saying is that
okay.
Neither man nor woman, neither brute nor human, but they're ghouls. So does that make them demons?
Yeah, and so, but he never actually says the word, but it's hanging there in your head, and I think that's a pretty neat trick, in terms of literary technique. And there's actually another moment, kind of like that, and we haven't often gotten deep into the particular word choices on these poems. So one thing in the third stanza, what is it? It's too much horrified to speak. They can only shriek from tune. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I hear that line, when I say that line, it's a little bit.
You're breaking up you're breaking up pretty bad there, man.
Okay, hello.
Yeah,
are we okay?
I'm losing. So I'm having a hard time following the train of what you're saying. It's like every couple of seconds it'll stutter, and then you'll go back to.
Same Chris, here. Are you hearing us okay?
I can hear Nate fine. You're breaking up.
Crud. I don't. See, you hung up last time. I don't know what happens if I hang up, if this continues or not. Because that worked after you hung up. You came back and it was clearer.
I think if you just slow down talking, it might be enough.
Okay. Apologize, audience. Technical difficulties. The internet connection is not perfect. Let me know if that continues. If there's still a problem, I could try switching off my audio, switching to just an avatar, seeing if just audio works better. Problems. But what I was saying, in the third moment with the wording that I think is really well done, and he says, too much horrified to speak, they can only shriek out of tune. Um, and I don't know about you guys, but for me, like whenever I read that part and whenever I say that part, like it has a little bit of a nails on the chalkboard feeling to me. It kind of bothers me just a little bit, and it fits like what he's doing because like just the natural rhythm. I want to add another another repetition there. I want to add shriek, shriek, shriek out of tune, but that's not what it says. Little offness, that little feeling of this doesn't fit right, actually fits what's going on in the poem because like everyone's uneasy or downright terrified. I
Yeah,
think that's a really nice moment.
yeah,
Yeah, and
and
what you were saying, about the whole, like I said, what you're saying about the whole, like, he never says that they're demons and that kind of thing. It also leaves this kind of like lingering tension, like something's not finished, and you kind of have that sort of graveside sense that, man, I wanted to go fishing with this guy again, or I wanted to have another Christmas or another dinner. Or I wanted to, I just wanted to do more with this person that is now gone and I can't anymore. And so, like I said, that it leaves that sort of like bothered lingering in your head that something has been left out. And so, yeah, he's doing really, really interesting stuff with it.
well, and that offness, it's kind of present from the beginning because he just keeps repeating like from the bells, 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 bells. Like you can't say a word that many times and have it just stay the same. It's anything you repeat like that's going to start sounding a little off. And you can't sound entirely sane repeating the word bells like 7 times in a row. So even when things are going well, there's still the sense that there's something a little off.
Well, and one funny thing with that, I actually, like I've said before, I memorize all these before I perform them for my channel, and I was actually like walking out in my neighborhood one afternoon. And I was working on memorizing this. I was going over it. I realized when I got back, like, if any of my neighbors saw this, they see me. I hope they weren't worried about by my walking down the street and ranting about bells, 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 bells. Um, so, but the other is it's I think he's also using the word itself as a bit of onomatopoeia. I think he's using the word itself as just this constant ringing, going, going, going. And it's also interesting because that I don't think that word was ever intended as onomatopoeia, but he manages to make that happen. I think that's pretty nice too.
Right, and he definitely plays with onomatopoeia because, like the very beginning, like how they tinkle, 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 like that sort of has like a bright, cheery sort of feeling to it, and he just uses that throughout so well. Like there are poems that you can get a lot out of just by reading, but I feel like this poem in particular, you just have to hear it out loud. It just doesn't work nearly as well if you're just reading it silently.
Yeah, and it's well, and actually feature of well done poetry in general, that the sound and the sense of it really need to match. They need you use it needs to use the sound of the words to maximum effect with a care that you don't have to as much when you're writing prose. So um, and I definitely did. This is another one of those where I definitely picked up more out of it as I was going along. It definitely grew in my head as I was working my way through it. Um, but one other thing, just in terms of the writing skill in this one, I was pretty impressed with how often how many rhymes he was Poe was able to find for that one word and fit into this. Because, like, bells is through the entire thing, and, like, he rhymes it a whole bunch of ways through the entire thing and makes it fit, which is rhyme heavy language. So that's pretty well done.
It can be tough to keep rhyming things. I mean, so a lot of times you'll have to resort to a forced rhyme or sort of like, sort of kind of, like you butt up the corners a little bit, you know. But I mean, yeah, he just flat rhymes it every time. And I guess, L is not the most uncommon sound. So it does have a lot of options, but to work it in and really keep, not have anywhere where it interferes with like the, sort of the tone of what he's doing. That's some real technical proficiency there.
Well, and
yeah.
Then also I like going back to they are neither man nor woman, they are neither brute nor human, they are ghouls. And it is their king who tolls as he rolls, rolls, rolls. I feel like ghouls there should rhyme with tolls, but it doesn't. And it just makes it feel like there is something seriously off in that section, which fits perfectly with what's going on. Like, it just feels like that line, like, ghouls should fit with the rest, but it doesn't.
Yeah, because I don't think that's probably the only instance I can think of off rhyme in this poem. And yeah, that is one thing I noticed myself when I was working on when I was like writing when I. It's been a while, but I have written some poetry myself, and that is one good deliberate use of off rhyme to if you're doing it, you can do it on purpose to create a definite sense of dissonance and uneasiness. And I think Poe handles that very well. Honestly, I've come out of this with a much more significant appreciation of Edgar Allan Poe than I had going in, I think. And that's not to say I didn't like him before, but
well, this does highlight a portion of his work that I feel like was not presented to me very much whenever I was in school. Like, his horror tales showed up a lot, and then for like his poems, I mostly saw stuff like The Raven.
And Annabelle Lee, I think, is the other one that people may hear of.
Right. And this one, it's just, I don't know, like, it just feels very different. And I've heard that, like, some Poe scholars don't care for it as much. It was actually, he had to try a few times to get it published, from what I understand. And it was actually published after he died, which actually, again, kind of fits well with the theme. But yeah, just overall, it starts off as a sort of pretty simple idea, just sort of ruminating on these different types of bells that a human might experience throughout their life, specifically at night. Like, he doesn't even change the time frames when we hear these. Like, each one, it's sort of at night, and he sort of contrasts those in different ways. So, like, in the first section, like, sledges with the bells. Like, I think of a sled with bells, like, that sort of sounds fun. And he even says, like, world of merriment. And then he has the wedding bells. So it's like, okay, you're thinking like wedding night, like love, romance, that sort of stuff. And then the next section, it's something is wrong. There's a fire, it's panic. And then finally, the last section is just sort of somber. And the last section, just within that, I feel like he plays around with it a lot, because it starts off like, what a world of solemn thought their monody compels. Like, it's just sort of dry. There's not really any joy. It feels like you should say it like monotone, very sort of just sort of beat by beat by beat. But then once he introduced the King of the Ghouls, it just starts to get more frantic, I feel. Like, even the lines seem to look a little bit shorter on the page, and there's just much more repetition. And it's
Yeah,
like that's the point where the madness hits.
and honestly, if you're saying this aloud, and particularly if you're doing this from memory, at that point it kind of becomes a little bit hypnotic. It's kind of weird, that last section. The other one other thing,
Like there's a
in
sort
terms
of
of
rhyme, perhaps. Like time, time, time.
that too.
Well, and the runic rhyme, that's a callback from the first section.
Yep.
And in the first section, it's just, oh, we're having fun, and then in the last section, it's, oh, this deranged lunatic is having fun while people just died. And so it's a very interesting contrast of the two occurrences there.
Well,
Now,
I feel like the runic means there's a sort of mystery about it. There's sort of an otherworldliness to it, which in the first section it's like, oh, it's a mystery, it's mysterious, but it's not necessarily an evil. Whereas in the last section, it's like, no, this is evil itself.
yeah. Well, I mean, in the first section, you got the silver bells on sledges and all that, and it's sort of like, it's like, man, it's like, who are all these people? Yeah, it's like, where are all these bells, ringing? Who is ringing this, announcing all this joy to us? It's like, it's like, who is this? Who is this bringer of merriment? But then in the end, it's like, who is this merry peeler of woe who announces, the suffering, who announces my suffering to everyone? The whole countryside knows now at the hands of this individual whom I can't see and yet is announcing my very intimate tragedy. So it really does, you kind of think of it that way with this mystery sort of idea, and it again just plays right into what he's doing. There was something I wondered if y'all got out of it that I kind of did. Sorry, Sean, was up?
No, go ahead.
This kind of also
Keep going.
Like, rather than being four separate, unconnected incidents, this kind of felt to me like it was almost like biographical. Like the speaker of the poem is telling a story. Like, hey, once upon a Christmas, all this merriment, and maybe they met, maybe as like a young child or something, they met a friend and all that, and then as they grew up, it became more, and there was a wedding. And so they're hearing the bells with this person again. And then there is a fire. And there's all this frantic and, emergency and all that. And maybe the lover didn't make it out of the fire. And so now you have the funeral bells to ring home the end of this story, which has been bounded on all sides by bells, bells, bells.
Yeah, there is a definite progression there, like childhood to adulthood. I can see that one. One other thing, in terms of like the way the sections fit together, I found interesting. Okay, so the first one is it's sledges, these winter sleighs going through the snow. So it's winter, it's cold, it's nighttime, it's black, clear, starry skies. Then the second section, it says the balmy air of night. So it's warm, it's comfortable, it's a warm summer evening. The third section, there's a fire.
Yeah, that's going to be during the dry season.
And well, the other thing is, it's slightly more than warm. It's getting uncomfortably hot at this point. And then the fourth section, well, it's kind of cold again, but in a different way. There's the cold body about to go into the grave. And so that, again, there's that weird connection between the most lighthearted, harmless section of the poem and the most grim, dark section of the poem meet in that weird way again. And it's, yeah.
Well,
Go
Yeah,
ahead.
well then like in the two middle sections, there's also two different references to the moon. Like in the wedding bells part, it's a turtle dove, which tends to represent love, like gloating on the moon, like she's there, like looking at the moon adoringly.
I
Whereas
have
then,
to admit, I totally didn't get that line. Like, okay, there's a turtle dove on the moon. I don't
I,
understand why or how,
I
but
I don't think it's a reference to the turtle dove being on the moon, but gloating on it, I think means sort of looking at adoringly. Uh,
okay, maybe.
I believe that was the intended usage.
Okay.
Well, I mean,
The
different cultures see sort of the formations of the moon's craters differently. Like, we tend to think of, oh, the man in the moon. So is there sort of like a sort of face up there? Although, to be frank, I've never really seen it. I've been like, nope, that's a no. The Chinese, apparently there's a rabbit up there is like grinding the elixir of immortality under a little tree. He's got a mortar and pestle, and I was like, no. So who knows? Maybe in Poe's day, the people ascribed, a loving moon as having a turtle dove on it.
Possibly. I think it's more of like sort of how you might be like doting on someone or thinking on someone, just applied to the moon. But in any
Oh.
case, it's all nice and happy and lovey. But then during the next section, it's you have the fire, which is trying to rise up to the moon.
That
And
was
it's
actually one. Took me a while to catch. It took me a while to realize what was going on in that section because the over is the bells, and so when what is it? Reaching higher, higher, higher with a desperate desire and a resolute endeavor. Now to sit or never. And it took me a while to catch that what was reaching higher wasn't the bells but the moon. So that was But yeah,
well, I believe it's the fire that's trying to reach up to the moon.
yeah, no, I figured that out eventually, but it took me a while to catch that. So, but yeah, and let's see, there's the moon in stanzas 2 and 3. No, I don't know. I don't know about Yeah, that is another interesting connection between them.
Well, and then also another thing that I was thinking was you have the first section where the bells are on the sledges, which kind of implies a sort of like movement, a sort of energy. But then in the second section, you have like the mellow wedding bells, like happiness and harmony. Like there's a sort of like stillness to it in a way. And then with the third and fourth sections, the third section again starts with a lot of energy, and then the fourth section again starts with a sort of stillness.
Yeah,
That's a really good point.
I don't know. Nate, did you have anything else on this one right now, or?
No, I'm still thinking about what Chris just said. Actually, that's kind of a really interesting point. That it's activity, then sort of rest, then much very different activity, and then a much more final rest.
There, there are a lot of interesting patterns going on between the sections of this poem, and it would, if I were still an English major, I would be planning a paper on this now and trying to figure out how to lay out the whole thing. Um, now I'm
I can just
uh,
imagine Poe sitting around.
agree. And
I can just imagine Poe sitting around for
sorry, I
months,
lost.
just muttering to himself, just getting all this
I
worked out in his
understand.
head because this is intricate. This is like Fabergé egg intricate.
Yeah, this is and it's also one of those things where you don't necessarily see a lot of that the first time, and you don't know that if you're just giving it a casual read. But like the more you go back to it, the more layers and the more levels of meaning you see. So I think that's yeah, really the best way to do a poem or a story. You know, you can read it just at a very simple, basic level and still enjoy it, but there's so much more there if you can give it that study. And it seems because one thing it seems like today, a lot of literary and intellectual authors write these books that you have to have, write novels or poems that you have to have a PhD in like 3 different fields to like get anything out of it. And it really seems to me that's not a. I don't think that's the best way to write much, because it's just like, how many people are actually going to be able to appreciate it? But building things where it can be appreciated at a very simple level, but there's much more going on underneath. I think that's a fantastic way to do art in general.
Yes.
Well, I'll be. I don't know. I'm honest. I think I've honestly said most of what I've got. Chris, Nate, either of you have much more right now?
I think I pretty much covered the stuff I like.
No, I'm good to go.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining me again, guys, and we will sign off for the night.
Have a good one.